Oh, you're live.
Mm-hmm. I think it actually notified me that time. Maybe it
Well,
didn't.
the algorithm is weird on YouTube.
There's big words. Impress me. All right. I think it actually notified me that time. Maybe it didn't.
There we go.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay then. Okay then. I think I got it figured out.
Okay.
See, I'm getting there. I'm getting there with this technology. Don't you? I know you think you're the smart one, but you know.
Good morning, Caleb.
What's up, Caleb? The man, the legend. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird doing this on a Sunday. It's kind of better in a way, but it's also back at it with work again now. So it's one of those deals. So.
Morning, James. Morning, Jeffrey.
But I
Morning,
can't
Barbara.
complain. I can't complain too much. It's all good. It is all good. I'll get going here in a bit. A couple minutes late, as usual. Somebody was asleep at the switch.
It's not like we're getting paid for this. So
I get 100% raise every year. What are you talking about?
wow.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so what's going on? How are you? How's your morning this morning?
Well, we had a really awesome day yesterday going to South Mountain and to Antietam. Last weekend, we had the reenactor appreciation weekend happen in Gettysburg. And we were part of some speaker series that was at Getty's Gear. Our friends over at Getty's Gear, as well as Maryland Sutler, sponsored it. So we gave a talk there about Bentonville. And then on Sunday, we did trivia.
Yeah, that was a fun weekend. It was pretty cool to get out, especially. I mean, where this part of the country is blessed with the weather. It was close to 80 degrees yesterday. It was funny. It was 30 degrees in Boston, but it was like 75 degrees in like Philly or New York. That was close. So the weather was tight. But no, we got out to do some stuff yesterday. One of those days you can jump in the car and don't stop until we get to South Mountain. We went to Fox's Gap and Turner's Gap, and we went down and went to see some people in Antietam, and then we found a good brewery. So it was a great day. It was a good day yesterday to get out of the burg, which I think a lot of people who in this area is probably a pretty good thing to do. You know?
Yeah, I think it is. Like, I mean, and to getting out, you realize there is this definite Gettysburg, I don't really want to call it a bubble, but very Gettysburg centric feeling. And you realize that it's, there's other stuff out there that is equally as interesting and important. Oh, I see the cat on your screen.
Oh yeah, he's over there. But but that's the thing too, is that look, we love Gettysburg. Everybody loves Gettysburg, but I think it's important to understand that the world exists outside of the 717 area code. And I think it's good. I mean, it's fun to look and compare and contrast the different campaigns. The Civil War obviously is a war of campaigns, so you can compare the two. In Maryland, the campaign of '62 was the dry run of the '63 campaign. Obviously, if it worked, there'd be no Gettysburg campaign. So the Chamber of Commerce here in town is very happy that McClellan was able to drive back over the Potomac, I'm sure. But I think when you go there and you see it, and especially if you go to an Antietam, for example, and you talk to some of the folks there, I think there's definitely a certain type of sort of their attitude towards the Gettysburg people who think that if you're going to visit the Civil War, just go to Gettysburg. And I agree with them.
Yeah, there are definitely some, like Leonard's on here. He's from Vicksburg. That is one place that I think, when the anniversary of Gettysburg happens, Vicksburg obviously gets overshadowed, and it's a place that we really would love to go visit. But there's places like that in the Western Theater, and the one thing that I realized, so I mean, 1862, obviously you have, Oliver Otis Howard is at Antietam, and we stopped by the West Woods yesterday because I had never been there before, and had a really good chat with the volunteer that was there. And the one thing that I'm like, oh, he's going to start. He mentioned Howard, and I'm like, bracing myself for impact, basically. What is he going to say about Howard? And he is very positive. Like he's a completely outside of Gettysburg. There's not the stigma with him. And what was really cool is so there's the monument to the Philadelphia Brigade that, or the second division.
Yeah, it was basically what would turn into Alexander Webb's guys here in Gettysburg, the 69th, the 70th, the 71st. The guys who fought at the West Wall, who sent Garnett all over the place, But that's really who they were. But I mean, again, people think that these people just landed on a spaceship in Gettysburg and fought and then took off and flew out. These guys had so much, and you look at, forget just the Battle of Antietam, look at the campaigns, and you're looking at the beginning of that army that would fight here. And you can see how it all kind of comes together, and how you can see how the Second Corps basically gets ripped up at Antietam. They have to reform themselves completely. I mean, you lose guys like Israel Richardson, who, I mean, a lot of people, the Gettysburg people don't know who he is, but he's somebody who is a rising star, a hard fighting division commander in the Second Corps. And when you look at the Battle of Antietam, where you basically lose 6 generals on each side, exactly. You look at South Mountain, the precursor to it, that you lose 3 on each side. So it's very symmetrical on the way it goes. But I think if you really want to understand, for the people who are here who want to focus on Gettysburg, the best way you can learn about Gettysburg is studying from outside of Gettysburg. Don't just sit there and read the Fonz books or the Connington books and walk around the battlefield and read the monuments and think you're an expert at it. What you want to do is you want to get an idea of, look and see, like, where the 12th New Jersey, the Buck and Ball Regiment fought before. Why there was such a push, why Eliakim Sherrill's picture is on the 126th New York, and why they chose to memorialize him. Why George Lamb Willards has a nice quote on the back of the 125th New York, explaining, because if you don't understand, if you know what happened with them at Harper's Ferry in '62, that makes sense. If you don't, like, okay, they must have liked this guy. But it all makes sense when you look at the big picture. And I think a lot of people, if you don't do that, it's like, it's like watching those Star Wars movies you like, right? If you just watch The Return of the Jedi and you don't watch the first 2, and you just watch that over and over and over again on endless loop, you miss a lot. You don't understand how they got to that point. And that's why the earlier campaigns, in speaking until afterwards, we're not even talking about the West, speaking of Leonard, because the redheaded stepchild of the Civil War is Vicksburg.
Well, actually, Jeffrey just mentioned that he was able to visit Chickamauga and Chattanooga battlefields last week, and he said, I want to say thank you because listening to Civil War Breakfast Club episodes during it brought it to life. That's really cool. So thank you for that. And we love Chickamauga, Chattanooga. It's, I don't know, again, I think gets overshadowed a bit by Gettysburg, and
not overshadowed, it's a complete eclipse.
Oh yeah.
And look, that's fine. I get it. I get it. But at the same point, is I think there's too much. Again, we've talked about this a million times. A lot of it's because of the movie, right? That it gets, at least this light being shone on some aspect of the war. But I mean, they make little references here and there to, even in that movie about previous battles and stuff like that. But, they talk about Malvern Hill and they talk about things like that. But again, it should theoretically give you an impetus to kind of create that thirst of knowledge to study this stuff. Because you have to
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, me personally, I've learned more about Gettysburg and beyond from other battles, other campaigns. Just like you can understand Vicksburg by studying the previous stuff. Right. We're going to talk about, we're going to step on the third rail next week, and we're going to do Fort Pillow, which would be hilarious for the comments on that one. But Fort Pillow exists because Island Number 10 fell. Right. It was a Confederate camp base named after Gideon Pillow. And when Island Number 10 fell, it became unsustainable. Union took it. And Nathan Bedford Forrest and his band of merry men wanted to go and capture it again. And that was the whole deal. And then there's all kinds of stuff that went down we'll talk about. But all these things are created by different things. And you can study Vicksburg, but if you don't study, the other stuff that, especially, I mean, I like Island Number 10 is to Vicksburg as Second Winchester is to Gettysburg, right? The things have to happen a certain way. Because you saw the first attempt at digging the trench around the river. You see how all these things kind of come back again to talk about it. But again, like you said before, when we talk about Pillow, there's certainly 2 sides to every story with this. And there is a very popular narrative to it. But again, when you look at certain quotes from people like William Sherman, it kind of,
Yep.
it's like, wait a second, that's not the way that I've read this. So we're going to try to do both sides like we always do.
Yep.
But again, this is one of those ones that best part about this is we're pissing somebody off there. No
Yep.
question about
Oh
that.
God.
But that's the
Someone
way,
will
but
get
that's what,
angry.
but oh yeah, but that's the way you got to do it though. You got to do it. You got to,
Yep. You have to talk about this stuff to understand what happened. Now, the one thing that, when the volunteer there, I think his name was James, right? Wonderful man. Like,
Buchanan, yeah.
yeah, knows his stuff about
The
the
mayor of
West.
the West Woods, they
Yeah.
call him Mary.
You ever find your go to Antietam, and if he's there, he explains it so well. And he was talking about, Howard leading this, like Howard was one of the ones in the attack. Now, keep in mind, Howard is just coming back after having his arm amputated. Fair
It
Oaks.
grew back though, right? Okay. But I digress.
Anyway, so he's back. This is his first major engagement since Fair Oaks. And the Union guys end up getting flanked by the Confederates, but as they run back, it's not them just retreating and running away. They are fighting as they're going back. But the one thing I've always thought is, flash forward to 1864, and you have Howard at Ezra Church, first battle as a commander of an army.
Mhm.
And he is constantly protecting his flanks to the point where Sherman is like, dude, you need to slow your roll. They're not going to come out. And Howard's like, I've been here before. I know what I'm doing. And Sherman let him have that independence. I used to think that it was based just off Chancellorsville. I think it was his experience in the Westwoods as well. That
Of course it was. I mean,
well, because if you look at that now, Ezra Church is built up, it's in a rural area. But if you look at how the ground looked at the same time, it looks more like the West Woods than it does, I think, at Chancellorsville. And I like light bulb kind of went off for me, and I'm like, whoa, he learned from that experience. And it was refreshing to see that his reputation at Antietam is really good. People are not falling into the Howard sucks trap that unfortunately happens here quite a bit. And there are people that hold on to that to the point where they're like, I don't know, they don't want to look at him anywhere else. They don't know he commanded an army.
yeah, well, that's the case for a lot of these people. There are people that you're a hero or you're a ghost, you're a whatever. But
Yeah.
that's the way it is, though. And if you study in Antietam, you'll see a different aspect of it all, and then you see the experiences Howard had when he went out west, certainly. But they all learn from it,
Oh, yeah.
and everything. It's funny how like Chancellorsville is somewhat like the lymph node of everything. Right, everything
Yeah,
kind of
well,
goes back to Chancellorsville a little bit, and
yeah.
there are some good learnings about that. I mean, if you, like I said before, if you want to study Gettysburg, Chancellorsville is a good place to start
That's
too,
what
because
Miranda said. You have to study Chancellorsville to understand Gettysburg.
you understand the psyche of George Meade at that point,
Hmm.
right? How he really, 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 really hated Jeb Stuart,
Yeah.
right? Because Jeb Stuart was made an infantry commander at Chancellorsville after Stowell went down, right?
Yeah.
And he had a chance to finally whip him, and everything went down crazy with Hooker, and he didn't get a chance to. And so when you see here at Gettysburg how they reacted a little bit towards the Confederate cavalry,
Yeah.
right? How they tended to be, and they're all humans. I mean, all these guys. I mean, every single one of them has some axe to grind against somebody. But that's what's cool about it. That's why you study it. And I think I think if you understand the big picture and you look at how everything plays into it, it is funny though how we were talking before about how these battles go, and Robert E. Lee had the same, he had the same game plan,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he was the Dick LeBeau of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He did what he did. It was always echelon attacks. It was always hit the flank, and if you look at his battle plans, they're almost all the same. Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, even Gaines Mill is a smaller version,
Yeah.
and it's because it works for the most part, you know. But you're studying at a good higher level when you really notice um, how they compare to other things, and it's very similar.
Yeah.
And that's why studying just the one battle like here or Vicksburg or Shiloh or Schrute Farms or any of the big boys, right?
Yeah.
You tend to fall into just seeing that battle in a vacuum. And if you don't understand how or why it's being done the way it is, it's
Yeah.
a disservice to yourself. And you could tell when you're talking to the Gettysburg people,
Oh,
the Getty's groupies, and it's nothing against them, but
no.
they tend to think that all the stuff that happened here, you know, Longstreet's counter march, Jeb
Yeah.
Stuart, Pickett's charge, Avery and Hayes over in the East Cemetery. That's the first time it's ever happened in any Civil War battlefields. Oh my
Yeah.
God. But then when you realize, you go, no, they did this at Chancellorsville. They did this at Second Manassas. They
Yeah.
did this at Fredericksburg. You know, I mean, the Union was adept to retreat. Speaking of Howard, when they got routed in the 11th Corps, and it was really Schur's guys and Schimmelfennig and all those guys, they were able to kind of try to maneuver their way back in the streets because a lot of
Yeah.
that experienced street fighting at Fredericksburg, right?
Yeah.
We did a lecture. We didn't do. We were present at a lecture last week for a woman who did the Battle of Wrightsville Bridge,
Yeah.
right? And she talked about that they were able to be adept at street fighting
Yeah.
because of Fredericksburg, and it helped slow them down
Mhm.
when Gordon and Early were trying to get over to Columbia. So
Yeah.
everything didn't just happen here in a vacuum. And I think it sounds so simplistic, but people like I do,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they just don't understand like how you could be in this area, okay, and have never been in Tatum. It just doesn't resonate to me.
Yeah.
It
It's,
doesn't make sense to me, you know?
it's definitely one of those things where I'm like, whoa, how, like it's literally like maybe an hour away.
Well,
Same with
it's just
like
because
not even. And it's such a like, and you got to go to South Mountain as well, because that's a fascinating visit. It's part of the Appalachian Trail. You can basically, we learned this yesterday, we didn't do it, but you can park at Fox's Gap and walk over to Turner's Gap. It's maybe a mile. It's not
I mean,
that.
you could walk to Michigan theoretically. I mean, it
Well, yeah.
depends on how, wherever you want to go,
Yeah. But I mean, and it's a great place to go hiking and stuff. But yeah, there are people here. We've had conversations with some of them. Like one time at the mine, there was someone there that could not answer why he believed that Buford was writing the note about Howard. He was like,
No,
I don't know why I believe that.
that's right. People can want to study what they want to study. All I'm trying to
Yeah.
say is if you're in this area, this Atlantic coast area, you're it's like you're starving at a feast, right?
Yeah.
There are so many great places to go, and like I said, we said before, if you want to learn Gettysburg, you study Chancellorsville, you study Antietam, you study Second Winchester, because then if you get to know about a good base study of them, Gettysburg makes a lot more sense. It
Yeah.
does. You understand certain things, and that's what's cool about it. But no shame on anybody who doesn't do it. But I just feel like you're missing the boat, right?
Yeah. And I just like, I have to say it was like refreshing to get out of town yesterday in many ways. Like
You just
I
like the
mean,
brewery.
the brewery was great, but I mean, it was great
Well,
to get
it
out and
was
like
good.
the weather was nice. But just to, and it felt so weird. Like, when the guy mentioned, like I said, when the guy mentioned Howard, I was bracing myself for something negative because 90% of the time, unfortunately, that is what happens. Like, and I think people sometimes wear it with a badge of honor, it seems like that, they're like, oh, he sucked and he never improved. And it's like, well, like that's not a fair assessment. Like, I've had people tell me like Hancock rode in and saved the day. It's like he didn't get there till 4. Everything
Well, that's just how
was in
people,
place.
want to study. That's
Yeah.
totally fine. But which you can study that you can just go an hour from here and Nakasee's here, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's so many good places you can go visit. There's many good things to do. Maryland Campaign School, though, and you mentioned South Mountain. That's an absolutely fascinating battle. And when you're
Yeah.
really there, and talk about brutal fighting, and you can, it's pristine. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the Wise cabin's gone, but you can still walk the field. We walked the North Carolina Monument yesterday. We went to go see the 17th Michigan. We went to go see where Sam Garneau's killed and where Jesse Reno was killed. But I mean, you can see a lot of those sites today, and you can get a good idea. And if not for South Mountain, and the Rebs, even though they lost the battle, they slowed. It's amazing to think when you say this phrase, but they did a good job slowing McClellan down, right? If you think of it, it's just kind of an oxymoron, but they did though. They were able to take those 3 gaps and slow the Union down long enough for Stuart to finish. I mean, Jackson to finish doing what he was doing at Harper's Ferry,
Yeah.
and get a Longstreet down from Hagerstown over to Sharpsburg at Antietam Creek, just in time. And unfortunately, this is where obviously McClellan does screw up, as he had them dead and the rights, and he took his foot off the gas.
Yeah.
That was it. But that's yeah. But you can walk those hills, and you can walk those sites. I was psyched because I really wanted to fight James Bondurant's Alabama
Yeah,
artillery
and you think you
platform.
found it, right?
Yeah, I think we found it. It's not marked. There's nothing really marked. Especially at Fox's Gap, there's really
Yeah.
nothing there. But looking at some of the old maps and finding, and we found this one area, which is just east of the old Sharpsburg Road, that that was the general area of where James Bondurant's Alabama guns were that just
Yeah.
raked the Union coming up the mountain. And it's not marked, but we think we found it, which is pretty cool.
No.
But that's why you do the history stuff. You get to walk these grounds and get to see. And if
Yeah.
when you're standing on that platform, you see the whole valley.
Yeah.
So you can just imagine just firing
Yeah.
those guns. And it took all day to get Bondurant off that hill all
Yeah.
day. It finally drove him back. No one knows who James Bondurant is, and that's totally fine. But he's somebody who, if you're a Confederate, is somebody who you should study because he helped keep the first and especially the Ninth Corps away from getting through the gaps and going right into Sharpsburg. And so he's somebody who's very understudied, but it's great to find his plot. That was a personal victory for me. I thought.
No, that's cool. Jeffrey said, no matter your favorite battlefield, if you spend the time on only one, you can lose sight of its place in the whole war. It's like only drinking Labatt's Blue because that's all you know.
See, he gets it.
That's a great analogy.
He gets it, and he's a Bills fan, and he gets it.
I think he's a Bills fan, is he?
I think he is. I'm pretty sure he is.
I'm gonna laugh if he's not.
I thought, well, for now that I'm sorry for insulting you, I'm pretty sure he is.
And you said that it's similar to the shit that Barlow gets for Gettysburg. One day, one battle isn't the end all and be all of these men, and sometimes it seems like it is. And I think what people fall into as well is that you have men here that after the battle, their careers are not as good. They don't have the same successes they had, be it because of a wound or just, whatever. They don't have that same trajectory they had. They had all the trajectory before. And I think that's why sometimes people, will fall into that trap as well. Whereas you have somebody like Howard and Slocum, both of them go out west, both of them have many, many successes, especially Howard, and including after the war. He's very, very successful as well, other than the stuff with the Freedmen's Bureau. But there's that. And I think, like if you can have your favorite battle, but don't forget about the others, because it's going to help you understand it even more. And also understand the people that are fighting even better as well.
Yeah, no, that's the whole thing. You can study these things and study and study and study it, but it's tough to, we always talk about going into rabbit holes and all this stupid stuff. Mm-hmm. The tough thing is going into a rabbit hole, not getting out. Yes. And you end up being a one-trick pony where you study one aspect of either one person, one battle, one whatever, one campaign, and you just get stuck in it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're realizing there's more than one side of that coin. There's a mixed metaphors here, but that's kind of what it is. The more you study, the better off you're going to be with these things. And I just find the Civil War fascinating because it's such a big thing that everything leads itself into it. But that's the scoop,
Yeah. Well, Jeffrey said, "Go Bills," but I redeemed myself.
See, I knew he was a Bills fan.
He redeemed himself with his Red Sox fandom.
He does. He just likes the colors red and blue, apparently. But that's okay. Yeah. No, that's cool. No, that's good. I knew he was a Bills fan.
Frank's on here and he said, "Good morning. Happy 160th of the Appomattox campaign. Who's ready for the shad bake cook-off reenactment?"
We went down there a couple of weeks ago, and we went to get back down there to go to Five Forks. Because we were we were at Petersburg, and we went down to Ream Station, and we have to go to City Point. There's so much. My God, it's like going down there. And this is what we were saying a little while ago is like being a kid in a candy store. It's like, or some kid being unleashed at Toys R Us or something like that. Everywhere you look, every exit is this battlefield, that battlefield, Sailor's Creek, Appomattox. But
it's like being in Atlanta. Remember that we kept seeing like there's Jonesboro, there's Kennesaw, there's like all these, and
it's like this. It's like the Japanese flash animation of cartoons of Civil War nerds. Like pull over.
Yeah, well, we pulled over at Jonesboro, not expecting to even go there.
I think someone was looking for beer, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
you were.
I would never.
Leonard said, but only if you have to choose. It should be Vicksburg.
We got to get to Vicksburg. That's one place we obviously have to do,
Yeah. The Gallant Bowen.
The Gallant Bowen,
Frank said it's also Robert Rhodes' 196th birthday yesterday.
Speaking of South Mountain, Robert Rhodes, the funny part about Robert Rhodes is you can tell if someone just studies Gettysburg, because if they think Robert Rhodes sucks, they just study Gettysburg. Robert Rhodes was a fantastic commander. He just had a bad day on July 1st. But you look at what he did at South Mountain. He had a great day at South Mountain. Absolutely great day at South Mountain. And he was a big part of that slow your roll that they did against those two gaps. And there was a lot of guys, a lot of the Gettysburg, Kemper, Garnett, Rhodes, all the greatest hits people, they were all there for the most part. D.H. Hill was kind of running the show as North Carolinians, and then James Longstreet shows up and says, I'm in charge. That pissed him off because D.H. Hill had just figured out the pass. He knew exactly where to go. And Longstreet hadn't been there before, and he decided he was going to take over. It's where John Bell Hood gets out of jail. He was court-martialed in Hagerstown because he captured a couple of Union ambulances, and his boss, Nathan Shanks Evans at the time, said, "You're going to turn them into me so I get credit for them?" Hood said, as you can imagine what Hood probably said, and he got himself court-martialed, and and finally, as the Battle of South Mountain began, Robert E. Lee finally said, "You know what? Just go. You're free to go." And the men cheered and cheered him. And Evans wasn't too happy with that, but and then the rest is history with Hood going. Obviously, you're talking about Antietam. His guys, his first Texas. Fighting against the Massachusetts guys and all those people, and it's all because of South Mountain. Well, so everything goes back to something.
What's crazy is a year and a couple days later, or a day later, Hood will be fighting in the Battle of Chickamauga in the Western Theater. September 18th, 19th, 20th, 1863.
That is true.
Richard said he's headed down to Richmond this week, going to drive the route of Appomattox. And then Leonard said, "Come on down to Vicksburg. We can visit Bowen together." Yeah,
we talked about that at some point.
Yeah, we've also talked about doing an episode.
Yes. Yeah. No. Well, Bowen's somebody he's always been there to do, but getting down there would be pretty cool to take care of that. So it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, MJ just asked how far South Mountain is from Gettysburg. I said it's maybe 50 minutes.
It's you can make it there in 40 minutes. It's not far.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful ride too, because you're going through countryside and farmland, and it's all the same roads. That's the best part about it is the roads that cut through the mountain. It's the same exact roads that the soldiers did. They're just paved over now, and they're wider. But you can sit there. You can sit there right at Fox's Gap. You can look down the old Sharpsburg Road. You can imagine Rutherford B. Hayes and his 23rd Ohio coming up the hill. And you can sit there and look at the vistas. I posted a picture, I think, on Facebook, or maybe I dreamt, who the hell knows, but of a then and now of Fox's Gap, and it's exactly the same. You just take the cabin out,
Well, Leonard said, "Let me know if you need Bowen info."
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, when you're going to talk about Fox's Gap, you're going to talk about the story of Daniel Wise and his well, right? And that's a fun story too, because he's after the battle took place. So you're talking about the 16th of September now. There were dead Rebs everywhere, mostly North Carolina guys. 20th NC under Iverson, he's there. And the next day, the 16th, there were dead Confederates everywhere. And there was a burial party from the 21st Massachusetts, and they were, and the ground is all rocky. It's a sucky place to dig.
Oh, you have to, the one thing I will say is if you go, you have to be careful on some of the paths when you're walking, because there's lots of rocks. It's like if you stick a shovel in the ground, you probably hit rocks. It's just impossible to dig. Well, there was a well owned by a guy named Daniel Wise, whose cabin was right there, right where the Jesse Reno and Sam Garland monuments are today. And they decided, let's just throw the bodies in the well, so my country can be free, right? And so they took 58 Confederates and they dumped them down this guy's well, and they stayed there for a long time. And afterwards, they got confronted by it. They said, "Did you dump the bodies in the well?" And no. Typical assholes, right? And they blamed Wise, and they said Wise said that he was getting $1 a body. So he took the body, all 58, and dumped them in his own well to make the money.
but then that ruined as well. So that it came out later on that no, and there was some research done by a guy named Steven Stottlemyre to locate the exact position of the well. But that's if you go there, you can get an idea of where it is. But yeah, they threw 58 Rebs down a well, their bodies, and they finally got them taken out, and they got buried in Hagerstown. But they were there for a while.
Yeah. And there's some good comments here. Kevin's on here. He said, "Howdy ho."
Oh yeah.
He's sitting in the Air and Space Museum while the creatures explore.
Oh, you cannot pay to get me to them. I hate that museum. Of all the
Smithsonian's,
no, that's of all the ones, that's the one I don't like. I don't anyway.
I like it because I'm a NASA, like a NASA geek. I love Chuck Yeager as well, and they have the Bell X-1 there, which was the plane that broke the sound barrier. That was like a huge thing for me to see when I was a kid, because The Right Stuff is one of my favorite movies. MJ said her favorite social media comment of the week was Howard sucked as a general because he didn't drink.
That's a hard-hitting analysis right there.
That's apparently the individual that said it did not know he commanded an army. Frank has a life update. He got a library card, which is awesome. Everybody should have a library card.
Congratulations.
It's awesome. And he said he's planning a Civil War cross-country road trip, New Mexico, Arkansas, Tennessee, Virginia, and Gettysburg.
Glorietta Pass action, huh? That'd be a cool place to visit. We would have visit with my friend Fritz, but unfortunately he died, so we can't go see him. But yeah, that's all a cool place. The Gettysburg of the West, they call it, Mary. Yeah. Battle of Glorietta Pass.
Definitely one. I think Frank and he mentioned that when he was here last time. He and I were talking about that. Like he was planning or he wanted to go out there. Jeffrey asked, how was the live studio audience recording for the Bentonville episode? Was the recording live because either of you did you drink at all? We didn't. No, recording because it was like, I mean, this doesn't matter, but it was like 9 a.m. and there was but it went really, really well. We had to record a little bit differently. So me as the sound person, I'm not 100% happy with the sound, but
no, it's clear. It sounds like if you listen to it, it's muffled a little bit because there was probably 10 or 15 people. A pretty good crowd.
Yeah, it was awesome.
A lot of them were there for the day, and I don't know if they listen to podcasts. I mean, the idea of drinking and might have mortified them at 9 o'clock in the morning, but that's fine. But no, it was good, and there was some questions afterwards. I thought they were pretty good. But overall, we appreciated people who came out for it, because we had a good crowd. It was a good episode to record. But yeah, it's a challenge doing it in front of people, but especially when you know the sound, it's just different. But
that's always my nervous thing when we're doing something new. Like I will spend the entire time thinking about that, worried like, oh my God, if the sound doesn't, work or whatever. But it was great to see like our friends Maria and Tony were there. They had been with us in North Carolina the previous weekend at the Bentonville reenactment. Curtis mentions that they paid 50 cents a body to make the Vicksburg National Cemetery.
Wow.
That's
means that the guys in the East are better union reps then. They got $1. But that whole dollar story is fake anyway. But before we kind of move on from that episode, we have to thank, Carrie and Jen and Kat and all the people at Getty's Gear, as well as John over at Maryland Sutler for hosting that event, because that was a great day of history. And if you are in the area, or if you're visiting, go visit them. It's a great locally owned mom and pop shop that sells a lot of great stuff. The cigars are great. The coffee's good. Atomic cider they have in there, and they're just good people. You could buy your your glasses and all the little knickknacks you can buy in town, but they're good people, and it's always going to support those people. They've always been very good to us. But it was an honor for us to record there. It's the second live one we did. We did one at the seminary, remember?
Yep, that was our first live episode.
And that was it's different with people. But it was I thought it was good, but it was nice to be asked to do it because it was great. It was great to see the people come out, admittedly. Yeah. And they were and most of the presentations throughout the day were filled just like that. They were banged out. There was a lot of people there. Yeah. And I think it was good. But to your point, I wish the sound was a little better, but that's what you get for recording at that type of situation with the echoes and everything like that. But no, we appreciate that. So hopefully you listen to it. And if you don't listen to it, that's fine too. And if you that's fine. But I was just saying, but if you get a chance to go to Bentonville, definitely do it, because it's a great vista to go. It's very pretty,
Bill Etzkorn mentions, how about episode on Beefcake?
Oh God, Beefcake. Yeah.
Beefcake is this 10-year-old kid that he and his dad listened to our podcast, and they came to see us when we were at the camp. The dad was really nice, actually brought us some beer, which was cool. But anyway, we asked the kid his name and he's like, my name's Beefcake. And the dad is just like, oh.
No, and that
And
was,
get this, his favorite general. We asked him his favorite general. He's like General Dan Sickles.
I go, who's your favorite general? He goes, Dan Sickles, right? And of course, I'm starting laughing. Next year, I text our battlefield guy friend. I go, dude, you got an illegitimate kid in North Carolina. He goes, I might. But no, but that was good, and it made the kid was 10 years old, and he's very well versed in the Civil War. So his father, they both listen, but his father obviously, great guy, and he's raising him right. But having a conversation with a 10-year-old kid who's that versed in the Civil War speaks well for the future in this field, because you're going to have kids like him coming up. And appreciating it. But that was fun. That was a fun conversation with that. And he gave us he had a musket that shot foam bullets. I'll give you one of those.
The Nerf gun. The Nerf
instead
gun,
of that one. And so he gave us one of his bullets, which we have over here. So it's one of our prized possessions. So but it's but no, so if he listens to this, so it was great to see them. And the kid's got a great future in this. So, and he's
there was, and he was able to give us his reasons why he likes Dan Sickles. Like he did, like, because he, I think he did the right thing at Gettysburg, like that. Like the kid was able to explain that, and I was like, wow, like,
yeah. I mean, if you've ever seen the movie National Treasure, the second one.
Yeah.
When Nicolas Cage is talking to the kid at the White House about the Lincoln assassination, about Eisenschimel, and he was like that, but it was awesome because it was in a good way. I mean, but no, there are probably 1% of adults in this country who've ever, this guy walking on the street right now. I bet you if I said, "Who's Dan Sickles?" he would know he's right in town here. This is a kid who knows it. So I thought it was great. It was entertaining. But you know what though? This field is full of great people. They really, really are. And him and his father are definitely
his dad's name was Mitchell. He was really, really nice guy. The kid's real name was
no, don't say the kid's
name. I'm not going to.
But I mean, but he was it was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah. No, the kid was he was a good kid.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. But it was definitely pretty funny though. It was definitely
funny. Edscorn said he wanted to adopt him. He would be fun in camp, that kid.
He would be. He'd be a drummer boy.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tommy Lee though, because he was a wild kid. But no, but Bentonville was great. I don't know if we've done this since we came back, or I don't know if we haven't, but we did the episode on it.
We haven't.
But I think it's Bentonville is a great study because it's not studied. And we were down there. We ran to Dave. Remember Dave?
Yeah.
He listens to this episode. He was from the day one. He was one of our very first listeners. We finally met him. And he lives and dies Bentonville, North Carolina. Yeah. That's where he's from. And he appreciates the fact that there's not a lot of podcasts I've seen that done anything on Bentonville. And so, and it's more of a surprise because it's such a fascinating study. Yeah. There's a lot of people who don't, who aren't household names, guys like Carlin, guys like Morgan, that we talked about. But again, you're talking about a lot of people who people should know, guys like Hardee, right? Yeah. Come to example. And I think it's a fascinating study because even though Joseph E. Johnston basically admitted as such that there was no real way they were going to stop them.
Yeah.
They did what they did, kind of like South Mountain with the Rebs, to slow down Sherman to prevent from getting over that Cox's Bridge, getting to Goldsboro to go meet John Schofield. And so he did what he had to do, but it's a bloodletting in some ways, even though there was not a lot of casualties as you think there might be. It was the last major battle of the war. It was the largest battle ever fought in the state of North Carolina. And it was one that I think is worthy of study because, again, if you want to look at that big picture, understanding the whole thing, you can't do without Bentonville in the Carolina campaign. Yeah. People think that Sherman's March to the Sea ended at Savannah.
It didn't.
He kept going.
Yeah.
He filled up the gas tank there, and then he kept going north. And he never really... Battle of Bentonville was the only time he really got hit hard since his Atlanta campaign. He had little things here and there at the March to the Sea, but not that much.
No, there wasn't too much on the march at all, other than Griswoldville, which was terrible. you know, for the people of Griswoldville, obviously, because it was just like older men and young boys fighting. And like the sad story about that we talked about with Bentonville in our episode, and we were able to go see the spot where Hardy's only boy, Willie, was mortally wounded, and he died a couple days later. And that was one that was a death that, you know, definitely should not have happened. It was obviously near the end of the war, but the kid had been wanting to go in the cavalry, wanted a chance to, you know, fight, I guess. And his dad, Hardy, was finally like, fine, go do it, you know, let him go do it. And he ends up getting wounded, dies a couple days later.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it was S.D. Lee who wrote Howard and let him know. And then Howard told his wife, but you could tell that death obviously shook Howard as well, because Howard had known the kid.
Yeah, that's the sad part of this, is that, you know, this kid's nagging his dad, you know, and they all knew the horse was out of the barn here. They knew the war was over. And he's like, I just want to get out there one time and blah, 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 fight for my whatever.
Yeah.
In his first time, the Texas Rangers, Terry's Texas Rangers, he goes out there and he gets shot in the chest.
Yep.
By Mower's guys. And really it's one of the many unnecessary deaths we've talked about many, many times. And he finds out right after Hardy makes that joke. You know, he says that battle was nip and tuck, and for a moment I thought it was more tuck. And he's laughing at that very moment. He sees his son rolling on the horse, being held up, holding his chest, the bullet in his chest. So he went from, you know, sky high to pushing Mower back to the absolute bottom, seeing your son mortally wounded. He died a couple of days later, and that's unfortunate. That's war, you know.
No, I did not know this. Mississippi State University was founded by S.D. Lee.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yep.
He's a guy who didn't he like say he won Tupelo and he didn't win Tupelo?
Well, you know, there was a lot of that. It was similar to Beauregard at Shiloh. Even, I mean, Tupelo was a little bit different though, because they knew they'd lost, and they said, "Oh, what a glorious victory it was," and blah 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 blah. I mean, even McClellan and Tatum. I mean, he wrote his glorious victory, and he's like, "I don't know if we won this. I'm going to say we won because friggin' whatever." And then they fortunately were able to eke out that hockey overtime shootout victory, which was basically what it was. But it's good though. It's just fun to study these and see how it goes, because they're all people trying to better their situation post-war. They want to survive it, obviously, but they also want to be looked upon as the man on both sides.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And there's Bill Etzkorn said, and you have not lived until you stand at the crater with your favorite people during a downpour and thunderstorm.
No, that was something, because we just got to Petersburg, and we knew we were like an hour ahead of that huge storm that was hitting the south, and we were right there at the crater, and the sky just opened up.
Yeah.
And poor Maria is so little, I think she just sunk right into the ground. We've never seen her since. I think she's gone. But we got to see it. We're going to see a lot of it too. But no, but that area of the crater, I mean, speaking of that, it's just a fabulous sight to see. And you can see the trench that was dug in by the Pennsylvania boys over there from the Pottsville area. But I mean, you see all this stuff and you realize, wow, that's really there. That's really, you know.
Yeah, and Leonard mentions that S.D. Lee was one of the 3 commissioners who created Vicksburg National Military Park. And then Frank asked how was the turnout for 160th. It was really good for Bentonville. Like there was a lot of people that walked by the camp where we were at. I did not go to see the actual reenactment because we had been out earlier. And anyone who has reenacted and had to break in a pair of brogans, you know what I'm talking about, that I got to a point where I'm like, I cannot walk anymore in these shoes.
Well, unfortunately, that's the way it goes. So, but yeah, it's you walk the first couple miles on it. They do break in eventually, but it is hard to it is hard to get it that way. But it's good. It's great to have them though. But being able to wear the uniform and get out there and see the stuff, and like I said before, you can read all the books you want. You can even walk the grounds, these battlefields. But getting into the weeds, literally and figuratively, and sleeping in a tent and waking up to reveille, and it does give you if everyone's trying for that 360-degree view,
it is worth it.
It's worth it.
Even just once, even if you're not a camping person, if you get the chance to, like, you know, if you have reenactor friends, I don't know, see if you can go out with them for a weekend or whatever. Someone will find you a uniform or a dress, whatever you need. Like I wore the uniform all weekend and I really, really enjoyed it. It
You in the uniform. It was like it was
only got called a farb by one person.
yeah, that's right. And obviously we got to thank Bill Escorn for this opportunity
Yes.
because
Yeah.
he's the head of the BMI group we're in. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be doing it. So
No.
we owe him a lot for that, and we definitely
No,
appreciate the opportunity.
he and Cindy are awesome people. Our whole group. Tony, Maria, Ty is the Ty.
Don't forget about Nathan. He counts
Nathan,
too.
Nate as well. Yeah, Nate was the one that helped me get in, like,
Where your bayonets.
yeah,
Even though some people accuse you later of having it wrong.
that's why when that person called me a farb, I was like, let me tell you who helped me get ready.
But no, it's a great opportunity to do stuff, and it's not. I realize it's not for everybody, but again, the idea of sleeping in a tent on the exact location where the 20th Corps camped. I mean, that's for a Civil War nerd. That's heaven. Who the hell wants to go do that? That doesn't want to do that. That was just a great time. But I think it's great to get out there and do that. And see these things because something too is down in a place like Bentonville, North Carolina. You are capital S South. You are.
Yeah. Oh.
And all the reenactors from the Confederates were legit Southerners. I mean, you hear in the conversation.
Actually, you know what? That's where the Canadians were reenacting because when we went to put stuff in the car that Saturday night, the Confederate camp was starting to pack up because the next day was canceled because of the rain. I saw a few Ontario cars there. I'm like, oh, this is where the Canadians are reenacting.
Well, no, what's cool about that too is you had the Citadel kids, who had their own company of soldiers from the Citadel, and that was cool as hell. Yeah. But it was a good experience. It's just I realize it's not for everybody to be outside the tents, and that's fine. But it does give you a perspective that you probably would appreciate, because you wake up middle of the night and you're on a battlefield. It's all foggy and kind of eerie and creepy.
You can hear owls and weird howling.
Yeah, but it's like right. But it's like that's where you're there where it all happened. So if you ever get a chance if people who do it know what I'm talking about, but the people who, if you're thinking of doing it, do it because it's certainly. You don't got to get there in the line and fire and do all that stuff.
No, I didn't do that. I mean, I went out scouting. Just real quick, we have someone on here from New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Yep, Colm Smith.
Well, welcome. What time is it in New Zealand? Isn't it like 4 days from now in New Zealand? We have to ask what the lottery numbers were.
But that's cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Oh, welcome. That's pretty New Zealand, huh?
Yeah, and that's international.
I reckon never been to New Zealand.
Never have either. Jeffrey asked, what's a better view from South Mountain or Lookout Mountain? For me personally, Lookout.
Oh yeah, Lookout Mountain, absolutely. Yeah. There's no question. I mean, Lookout Mountain it's a little bit different because you're in an area where it's not really battlefield, right? I mean, you're at the peak. The battle took place a little bit down the mountain. But the view from Lookout Mountain to Chattanooga with the river is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, there is no better view in the Civil War than Lookout Mountain. You just sit there. You can sit there for days. You don't even know who Robert E. Lee is versus Sarah Lee is. You'll still appreciate that view, right? South Mountain's cool, but when you get to the very top, when you get to the Washington Tower, you can climb the tower. What's cool about that is you can see the Antietam battlefields.
Yeah, that's what Richard just said. Like, it's good views if you're there in the winter. But the Washington Tower, the memorial is good there.
Watching you walk up that hill, Mary, that was a good time.
That was
complaining
fun.
The whole way.
I didn't complain, but like, and the thing with Lookout Mountain is it gives you a great idea of why the city was so important. Mm-hmm. And you can see how the river winds around. You can see where Sherman would have where the Cracker Line opened and Sherman would have come down the river in the boats. You can see Browns Ferry. You can see all of it. And it really gives you, when I first went there, the one thing I was like, I get why Lincoln wanted this town so badly, why this had become the most important city to have in the Confederacy at the time was Chattanooga.
Right.
Vicksburg had been the key, but I think Lincoln, once they got Vicksburg, he's like, okay, next we have to get Chattanooga, because we get Chattanooga, we get the railway hub, we control that. And you also get an idea of how the Confederates had surrounded the city after the Battle of Chickamauga as well, because you can see, like, now it's built up a little bit more. you can see Missionary Ridge. One time when I stayed there, I stayed on Missionary Ridge, like it's a housing development, like there's houses there, but there's an Airbnb there. And it was pretty much where Claiborne's guys in that area had been, because he was camped out in Missionary Ridge from September to November of 1863.
Mhm.
Colm said it's 4 a.m. on Monday morning, but so worth listening to.
4 a.m. Well,
Thank you.
he gets the A for the day. 4 in the
Yeah,
morning. Listen to our
that's
goofy
awesome.
asses talk. Wow, well, welcome. Hopefully things are good over there. Hopefully it's warm. Watch out for those great white sharks out there. There's a lot of sharks out there.
Yeah,
It's like back in Cape Cod, except
New Zealand
worse.
and Australia. Bill said that Mara carried a rifle taller than her through the woods, got the intelligence we needed, and didn't get captured. Oh, that was a thing. I thought we were going to get captured, and I thought it was going to be me.
Oh, if you got captured, oh, that'd been so funny.
No.
Oh, it would have been hilarious. They would have marched you through the camp. Oh my God. But we got in there and got out of there pretty cool. That was a good time.
Tony was my big brother for the day, so he looked after me.
So funny. But again, going back to South Mountain, we think about that. It's a great place to walk. I mean, even if we saw a lot of hikers just walk that Appalachian, the trail there, and people would park over Fox's Gap and walk up, right past where we think the Bondurant artillery was. You walk along those trench lines all the way down. We only made about the peak of the mountain before we turned and came back, and we decided to drive the rest of the way. But you could walk all the way to Turner's Gap, and then from there, you walk across the street, go up to the Washington Monument at the very tippity top, and you can see forever. You can see Pennsylvania, West Virginia.
Yeah.
You can see Russia. Some people might think, I don't know, but you can see everything, and so. But it's cool because you can see Hagerstown, and you can look over and see Antietam, and you can literally follow the path that Longstreet would have had to march to get to South Mountain, then fall back to Antietam, Sharpsburg. And you can see the exact roads because it's all mostly farmland. And of course, things have been built over, but in some places. But Lookout Mountain's great because like you just said, you can stand up there at that park up there, and you can look out and you can see Missionary Ridge. You can see the river. You can see where they crossed, where the Cracker Line was. You can see everything, and you can see exactly where Hooker would have been.
Yeah. And
you can see Pigeon Hill, and you can see where Sherman would have been, where Thomas was, and where Claiborne was. And all in front of you, you can just kind of point. It's like standing on top of Little Round Top here in Gettysburg, except higher, and you can point out everything that happened in the battlefield. So it's one of those great vistas. I would say Lookout Mountain is like we said a little while ago, is the best view in the Civil War. Yes. I don't think it's even close. Other ones I've seen.
It is. It's a thing to get up there. It's a windy road. But then when you get up there, it's they've got some cannons and stuff. It's not exactly where they fought, but it's you get appreciation for why it was called the Battle Above the Clouds. There's always I took a picture one time when I was there, and it would have looked just like it did at the battle with the clouds, because that day it was all cloudy. And I remember we did the episode on it. You had talked about how when the men fired their rifles, all you could see was the flash.
I remember you were saying that when you asked people when they were firing the cannons with the clouds, did any Care Bears get killed? You were concerned about that. Remember that?
That was awesome when I did that in the plane outside, and I'm like, who lives there? The Care Bears in the clouds.
Weird,
and I said it just loud enough that people heard it.
Just something about a watch list, probably. Yeah. But no, but you can see, and it's great to see these places. And what's amazing is nowadays you drive up there, but just imagine having to walk and lug artillery up there. I mean, getting cannons. We were talking about James Bondurant a few minutes ago. How he dragged those guns up there. Or how the Union got the guns a Little Round Tops and walk in the park compared to South Mountain, and getting the horses up there, basically 14 horses per gun, and how that must have been. It's mind numbing how these people lived back then. But it's a great place to go if you haven't been to South Mountain. Put that on your bucket list because you can literally park your car and you can walk most of South Mountain. And it's a nice walk. It's all paved. It's all, as far as all past, on the Appalachian Trail, and you're literally walking in the footsteps of where a lot of people's favorite generals later on all fought there. I mean, Kemper fought here, Garnett fought here, Longstreet, D.H. Hill was here. Future President Rutherford B. Hayes in his 23rd Ohio was here. Sam Garland, who. Confederates know who he is, but he was a huge loss to the Confederates when he was killed, to brigade commander from North Carolina. And we talk guys like Zollicoffer and people like that. when Garland went down, that was, again, he died young in the war, so people don't realize how impactful he would have been. He would have been a corps commander, if not higher, if he lived. He was that big,
Yeah.
and he got killed right at the cabin there.
Yeah.
You know, and literally within pissing distance of where Reno would get killed later that day, who was another huge loss to the Union Army. Because what does that do? Jesse Reno getting killed at South Mountain totally undid the Ninth Corps. So Burnside and Jacob Cox got a share in Antietam in those communication errors back and forth with McClellan and the Ninth Corps down at the Rohrback Bridge, which is the Burnside Bridge now. That probably doesn't happen if Reno's alive. And that delay gave AP Hill time to get here from Harper's Ferry, which pushed them back. So there's a great what if right there. If Reno's alive, they get around, they're going around that by the auto farm.
Yeah.
And then you got the Second Corps going around the other flank, trying to get to Sharpsburg, trying to pincer them. That history could be totally different. But and all because of the 35th Massachusetts, Mary, my Massachusetts boys, they went up on the same hill we did yesterday, and they came back and told Reno, no, there's no Rebs here.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So he stood there on his horse. The second after he said that, the line opened up and fired and killed Reno. So they must have missed him.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Bill Etzcorn says double canister beer is my favorite.
They should make a beer called Garnet's Double Canister IPA.
Oh.
Man, it's so funny.
That picture you made.
It would have to be like a red ale, though.
Oh.
You open up and a big red cloud opens. I don't know. Maybe, who knows?
It's so bad.
I know. That's what I'm going to. But no, but it's cool, like I said, to study these earlier battles, because then you can see how how Hancock ends up at Corps commander, how Howard does, how all these things. Slocum, even though he had a pretty tough day at the West Woods, he's going to rise up to be Corps commander. As he was a division commander at the time. So it's fun to think about,
Yeah. You were laughing. Bill Pink Mist Ale.
Yep. Too funny.
Oh my God. What was I gonna say? Well, I think too, like, unfortunately, someone dying is often why people will, move up in command. That's what happened with Howard. It was unfortunately the death of James McPherson that put him in charge of the Army of the Tennessee.
Yep.
And I mean, that is a great story as well, because Sherman goes to Howard and says, okay, so you're going to be in charge of this army. And Howard's like, well, Hooker outranks me. I don't think he'll be very happy about it. And Sherman's basically like, you're in charge of the army. We don't want Hooker here anymore. Like, that was and Hooker left after that. He took his ball and went home. Now, there were some that were upset that Blackjack Logan wasn't put in charge of the army, because he was the one that took it over once McPherson had killed, like he moved up in command that day. Blackjack leaves Howard out of his official report for Ezra Church. There was always a little bit of animosity coming from Blackjack, I think, but whenever Howard writes about Logan in his memoirs, it's always very positively. Like, he kind of goes out of his way to say he did a great job, and I think Howard understood that, there was some kind of animosity there over him taking command as well. But that's another good story, where Sherman's like, you're taking over, and Howard's like, it should go to Hooker, and Sherman's like, you're taking over.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hooker at that point, like a lot of times, you know how it is. You run your mouth too much, you get a little too big for your britches. You end up getting basically blackballing yourself. Yep. We saw the same thing happen with Hardee, right? Yep. On the Confederate side. Yep. But when he got the shaft, in his opinion, up to Atlanta, there's no right or wrong to it. It's like the Department of North Carolina, ended up being the land of misfit toys at the end. Yeah. That's where Joseph E. Johnson got shipped to.
The land of misfit toys.
Right. When you look at the people who comprise that Confederate side of Bentonville, I mean, it was like what's left over after you make the sausage, right? Yeah. That's what it was, though. And they ended up being put in an extremely important position. And it turns out that, maybe Lee wants to try to escape and try to get down to join up with Johnston, not vice versa. So he kind of realized, well, you know what, maybe just Johnston doesn't suck after all.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people historical memory think too. He's somebody who unfortunately doesn't get a lot of the credit that he deserves for different reasons. And But that's, that's why you study it though. I mean, there are some people who think he's great. There are some people who think he's terrible, and some people think he's in
I like
between.
Joseph B. Johnson. I think he doesn't have I don't think he has the reputation he deserves, kind of thing. Like, I think he needs a better reputation in the Civil War because he isn't
No,
good.
there are guys like Joseph E. Johnson. Rosecrans is another one who doesn't get who gets the short end of the stick too, and it's because if you're looking pound for pound, the most underrated U.S. general might be Rosecrans at that
I think
point.
so, yeah. And Cisco just mentioned him saying that. I was reading last night the General Rosecrans Commission was surreptitiously backdated by the War Department so that Thomas wouldn't get upset about being bypassed.
Yeah, I mean the cheese fell off the cracker with him towards
Yeah.
at one point by the time we get to Chattanooga, which is going to happen. But that doesn't mean that Tullahoma wasn't a great command, that
Yep.
Stones River wasn't a good battle. We say this all the time: right guy at the right time.
Yep.
And that's kind of how he was. Um, and there are people who just can who get fired on both sides. Then there's the Confederate people who seem that as bad as they are, they keep getting lifted along. They never go away.
Yep. Bragg.
Oh, but yeah, but for the most part, I mean, look at Bragg. I mean, he's somebody who I don't think he was as bad in the Army of Tennessee as people think he was, but he wasn't respected. He had a lot of people who wanted his job. Longstreet, Hardee, everyone pick one, right? They all wanted his job. All right, and they didn't like him because he had it. But he did well at Chickamauga, right? He did. Now they'll say, well, he was aided because Longstreet came with John Bell Hood and they had the breakthrough at Snodgrass, the whole deal. Yeah,
I mean,
okay, fine.
He got screwed on the first day because he had to go change his whole battle plan because he wasn't expecting Minty and Wilder to be
right.
there.
But if you're going to give credit for people who maybe just because they were the big man sitting in the big chair, or you're going to rip them for having a bad plan, you're going to give credit where credit's due. He did get the army. He did put that Army of Tennessee together and really tighten their discipline hard to get them to fight. So he was kind of McClellan-esque a little bit, building that foundation.
He was a good organizer.
Right, but he gets shifted around like a Coleman first grade picture day, Mary, right? He gets passed along. He ends up in North Carolina, and then he screws up that whole stupid thing in Bentonville. So he doesn't have not a lot of great days for him, but he never goes away.
Yeah.
Beauregard was a good general, but he ran his mouth a lot. He never went away because at least they know he was halfway decent. Let's keep this guy in the bullpen in case we need him. But he had that measuring contest with Jeff Davis and he hated Davis.
Yeah, they hated each other.
I mean, he hated Davis till the day he died. He refused to go to Davis's funeral, be a pallbearer because he hated him that much. Even in death, he hated him. You got to appreciate that, Mary, a little bit.
Oh yeah, he stood by what he believed. Cisco mentioning Thomas, that's another guy we've talked about this many times on here, that I see him as being underrated as well, because I think he gets overshadowed by Grant and Grant and Sherman. But you read what the men are writing about, like Howard saw him and Grant as being the greatest two guys in the Union Army. He said there was nobody better than the two of them at all. And Howard was like, Sherman's good too, but he can't execute a battle plan as well as Grant.
No, right. And you could look battle to battle, like we said before, and see how it goes. But seeing how they got there is the coolest part about it. I think so anyway.
Yeah. I've always likened Thomas to Eeyore. Remember I got in trouble for that one time from somebody? Somebody got
somebody on social media gave you a hard time for that.
Yeah, they're like, how dare you compare? I'm like, it's a joke.
Yeah, sometimes people take these a little bit too seriously.
He's like, the thing with Thomas is Thomas was the kind of the voice of reason with many people, like especially with Sherman. He would be the one to kind of like, should we be doing this? Kind of talking him out of stuff. And I think he was, he always had that stigma of being the Virginian, which was really unfair. And I think that prevented a lot from happening for him, I think.
You know who didn't catch that crap, believe it or not, was Jesse Reno, because he was a Virginian too.
I didn't know that.
And he was hated by a lot of the Confederates because they thought he was a turncoat. So there was a lot of that.
Well, Thomas wasn't liked by the Confederates.
You know who hated Jesse Reno was D.H. Hill.
Really?
Yeah, he hated himself from Jesse Reno. He just did. And so that happens on both sides. Sometimes people don't they hold on to their values. They don't want to switch sides,
Yeah. Well, that's why Thomas, I think, is buried in New York. His family completely disowned him, didn't take his picture down, turned it against the wall so that when people came over, they could be like, that's our, you know, former brother or son or whatever, right? It was his sisters that did that they were, you know, and he knew he was always going to fight for the Union.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, there are guys like Reno, same deal. I mean,
Yeah.
he was a short, little, chunky little dude, but he was a very popular guy. Everybody loved him. He was very popular.
Mhm.
He was from Wheeling, Virginia, now West Virginia. Stayed with the Union, and he was despised by most of everyone in his hometown, his peers. Now, Wheeling eventually flipped to the Union side,
Yeah.
but he stayed the Union the whole time. So admittedly, he was from a Union-esque part of the state of Virginia
Yeah.
all along. But again, his contemporaries who stayed and went to the South did not forgive him for it.
Yeah. Well,
After Reno was killed, Hill did a little victory dance
yeah.
at South Mountain, dancing on his grave because traitors get what they deserve type thing, one of those deals.
Wow.
But
That's another stuff. Well, he was born in the North. Gibbon was born in Philadelphia area, but his family, when he was young, moved to the Carolinas. He was another one that obviously fought for the Union, but his brothers fought for the Confederacy. But he was another guy that was like, oh, I'm fighting for the Union.
yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, a lot of people, it's like, okay, I mean, if a civil war broke out today, what are you going to do? I mean, no matter how the hell, it's a tough decision for people. But there are a lot of people who swore oaths to military commissions who stuck to those oaths, and there are other people who didn't.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, it's a difficult time to compare eras because the United States as a strong federal government was created because of the Civil War. Not it was, and so your home rule. You're like the movie says, the government of my state is my state.
Yeah.
If you're a Virginian, you're a Virginian first, and then you're an American second. That's how they saw it. Yeah. So it's easy to sit there and go, oh, but again, put yourself in their shoes. What are you going to do if your entire family or friends are all going one side? Are you going to buck the trend like Thomas did, like Reno did, or are you going to be like Lee or Longstreet or Armistead and go the other side? I mean, it's not an easy decision. I mean, I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I mean, I have my own personal opinion, but I realize that there are other sides of it that people are going to look at. But yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah. Cisco said Reno's grave has a sign, no dancing.
Yeah, it probably does. It has a big disco ball hanging across the street. They should make a DH Hills nightclub across the street where the 17 Michigan is. Oh, God. The thing spins around.
The DH Hill nightclub.
Maybe a roller skating. It's like roller skating rinks anymore. I can maybe do that.
Yeah, they still have them.
Yeah, but no, but that's the truth though. And then so for some people, that's why it's a very personal war. That's the way it is.
Yeah. Well, James yesterday, the guy that we were talking to, he did a really great job about talking about how it's a very personal thing. It has far-reaching effects because he brought up the fact that companies are made up from these smaller towns and there's brothers and cousins and neighbors fighting together. So when they die or something happens to them, it affects the area where they're from. You have
that's why they fought the way they did because it's like you're not going to go back to your hometown and wherever you're from, Montpelier, Vermont, and when everyone in your town knows you turn and skedaddled, you never go back to your town again. I was talking to one group of kids one time about the Civil War, and they were like, well, why in the world would they fight? Would they walk right into cannon? That's so stupid. I would never do that. Kids, heathens they are, right?
Yeah.
But I put it back on them. I said, well, look at this way. Just think about teamwork for a second. Who plays sports? Who plays baseball? Who plays soccer? Who plays hockey? They all raise their hands,
Yeah.
I go, if you're a hockey goalie and you purposely let in a goal, what are you going to do? You're going to play. Your team's not going to like you, so you'd have to represent. And they understood the concept. You put on the teamwork and don't even mention fighting, and they can sort of quasi understand at that point, but to a war aspect that hopefully they never will. But again, there are certain resonation points that everybody has about why they do it. We were looking at the South Carolina over here, march into the Bigelow's guns, and they get that order to turn to their right on their flank, right, which exposed Tilden, and it ended up leading to the fight in the wheat field. Mm-hmm. Well, why would you expose your left flank openly to canister fire?
Yeah.
When that's not going to, but that's the orders.
Yeah.
You did what you did, and by a bad point, a lot of them felt I'm going to die. What am I? Well, someday I'm going to. If this is
Yeah.
if this is what it's going to be. Um, but it's a different thing, though. It's just how.
Yeah.
Fortunately, most people on here hopefully will never be in that situation.
Yeah.
But again, it's a different era, and I think if mentally you stay in the era, it's much more easy to understand when you start comparing eras, right?
Yeah.
That's when you get in trouble because you're putting the modern day history and politics into the past.
Yeah.
And we see, and that's the biggest fallback in people who study the Civil War, is they sit there and say, well, they did this, they did that.
Yeah.
They never, no, in the time, that's what you did.
Yeah,
That's what you did.
exactly. Very, very different time from
Yeah.
now. AQ mentions Roller Palace in Beverly was the best on the North Shore in the
Oh,
80s.
we had a Wallex in Waltham. Oh my God, you kidding me? That's if you were cool, you went. Okay. They had a guy, he was an old man. They called him Chin Chin because he had double chins. We were such mean kids. And he had the whistle, and he blew the whistle, changed directions,
Yeah.
everybody got all excited. The four wheel, oh my God, they tore it down to build condos naturally, but that was the dream. That was living. You Wallux on a Friday night, everyone in town, that's where you were.
Wow.
You would have been invited. You've been staying at home probably.
Probably shoved into a locker.
But again, but it is one of those things though, and you see this throughout the wars as it
Yeah.
goes on. Maybe not so much. I don't say now modern day wars because I don't want to disrespect anybody now, but I know it's if you go off to fight somewhere, you're fighting with people from all over the country now.
Yeah.
Back in the Civil War, you're fighting with people in your own town.
Yeah.
You're
So
raising you're raising regiments, and we're not talking about not every city's Boston or Philly or New York. You're talking about some little hamlets in the middle of nowhere where there
Yeah.
are villages like Bentonville.
Yeah,
I
that was
mean,
just a village.
just a couple of buildings. And so of course, if you're going to be put in a regiment, you're all going to be with friends and family, people you've known
Yeah.
your whole lives. And people didn't travel, they didn't move around, they didn't get jobs in Arizona and move on. They were generation upon generation. So that's the only home you knew. So of course you're going to fight. You
Yeah.
had no choice.
So Bill Pike mentions roller skating and mini golf at Wallex.
Oh God, you kidding me? The bowling alley, and then they had a really cool little ice cream place. They tore out to make the Burger King, and the whole town was up in arms about that until they got the Burger King. I was excited. It's just good to hear good Wallex talk.
Yeah.
Good times.
What was I going to say? Yeah, the one thing that I really enjoyed yesterday was so seeing that obviously the Oliver Rose Howard placard that is at the West Woods, but it talks about how when they bought the land for the monument, they had there was land left over and they wanted to do something with it, and they made it into a park for people to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like, it's like, they're like, we want people to come here and enjoy it as well. We want to honor honor the men who fought here and remember what happened here, but we also want people to enjoy the area, enjoy the nature that is here as well.
You know what's like that too is Camp Meade. Remember Camp Meade?
Yep. Yep.
With the 54th and 55th Mass. No one ever thinks
Yep.
about the 55th, but there was a 55th. Everyone thinks about the Glory Guys, 54. They trained at a camp just outside of Boston on the South Shore, in the town of Canton now. It was called Reedville at the time. And you can go to the place. You can see where Robert Gould Shaw's headquarters was. You can see where the parade ground where they trained.
Yeah.
And they made it into a park.
Yep.
They have little kids' toys, those little rides you can ride.
Yeah.
And they wanted to set up like Civil War tents. You can go in. They got markers throughout to explain what happened there. It's good. It's a good way. It's a good way to merge the history for the old and the new.
Yeah.
So the kids can go and play, and maybe they'll read a monument somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
Get
Well, the one thing I like too about exploring the battlefields, and I do this everywhere I go, is I have like a bird watching app on my phone.
No, I know.
And I will add birds to my life list and stuff. It's really cool. Like, and I've seen saw a wood duck on Crawford Ave one time at the pond, which was really cool. And I saw I got a couple new ones in North Carolina as well. So there's that stuff to go out and do as well. And where I've seen a lot of people bird watching is actually Manassas.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, there are places, a lot of these places. Speaking of Antietam again, if you go down to, where Stabley's Fort is,
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of the battlefield that's overgrown by trees, and the Park Service won't take the trees down because there's a certain type of bird that lives in those trees.
Yeah.
That's endangered. so you can go there and see the wildlife. And people don't like wildlife on battlefields, as you know, Mary.
Yeah.
But again, there's a method to the madness with this stuff. But yeah, you go to places like that and you'll see some
Yeah.
things. Did we see a bald eagle recently?
Yep. We did on the way home from North Carolina. We saw a bald
Yeah,
eagle.
that was pretty cool. Trying to eat a rabbit more correctly.
It dropped it.
God,
I
that
don't
was
think
you
it
know,
was.
you
It
know what
wasn't
that
a
was.
full-grown
That was at
bald eagle.
that was a Reeve Station. We saw that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, yeah. There was a ghost of Hancock. Turned into a squirrel. You know, but that's the thing too, is that you see a lot of different things like that. But it's pretty cool though.
Yeah, no, it's cool like that, the nature is there. Well, we saw a deer yesterday too on our way up, which is not uncommon in that area.
No.
Cisco mentions he saw wood ducks in Southern California. That's cool.
No, definitely. But I mean, when you go to these big battlefields, even small battlefields, taking the whole thing, all of it, because there's so much more than it's cliche, but the whole get out of the car thing, it is true though. But it's also get out of your comfort zone of your battlefields.
Yes.
Because there are people we know, and I mean, if you live in Tennessee or Vicksburg, for example, you're gonna be more inclined to go to Vicksburg because it's the local battlefield. There's not a lot around there.
Yeah.
Here, there's so much. You're here in southern Pennsylvania. You are an hour from probably 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 Civil War battlefields.
Yep.
And there are people we know who don't go to any of them. They do the same damn thing. They go over to the Angle, they drive around, they go to Pickett's Charge. It's such a shame to miss out on so much.
Yeah, there's so much to see here. And like even in Atlanta, like I was saying, like you go to Atlanta, like there's so many battles there in the Atlanta campaign as well.
Well, again, people, there's also, I don't want to say there's an overkill with some of this stuff too. And this is going to surprise you, Mary, but some people, and I don't know who these people are, don't care about the Civil War.
Nope.
They don't care. My next door neighbor here, our next door neighbor, Dustin, okay, couldn't care. He's been his whole life here. He's probably been on the battlefield in the last year, maybe once at most. And we live literally 1,000 yards from Pickett's Charge.
Yeah.
But that's because you grew up. I grew up in Lexington, Waltham area. I went to Battle Green a couple of times. I went to Battle Road once or twice because it's there. You don't care. So, but I think it's great to travel and see some different things, to see what's out there, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like Frank says that he tells his friends that if you don't know history, it's still fun to walk the battlefields for the scenery, and that's true as well. O'Brien asked, have you ever been to Bristow Station?
Oh yeah. No, I went there with our friend Bill a couple of years ago, and it's a great dog walking park.
Yeah.
But it's cool because you can park there. I forget the name of the road it's on. It's like Jubal Early Road. It's a Confederate road. I forget the name of it. He probably knows, but you can walk to the old cabin back there, walk the whole grounds, and go down to the railroad tracks. Right. Yeah. And we did an episode on Bristow, I think. I think we did.
Yep.
But that's a great battlefield because you can still, for the most part, you can stand on that hill and look down and see the whole thing. Mm-hmm. In Bristow Station, that's an important battle too, though, because it's post Gettysburg. It's right after the big merger took place. So the 11th and 12th went west. The Longstreet's guys went west. But it's when Lee was falling down to that Culpeper V area. Yeah. And Meade was chasing him. And people forget that Lee didn't do anything, but that whole thing. But it ends up culminating pushing back at Bristow Station before they end up going to Harper's Ferry. Yeah. So it's kind of like if you want to do like a full 360 on Gettysburg, you can study all the way to Bristow. Yeah. Because the tremors of Gettysburg affected that battle too. And that's when Lee finally fell back, and that was the end of that. But he was coming back, Gettysburg too, the search for Curly's gold, right? Exactly. And so Bristow is an important battle when you study it. Mm-hmm. And you realize some of the horrific mistakes. You want to talk about George Sykes peeing on his own, my God, stepping on his junk. And there's a reason why Sykes doesn't have a statue at Gettysburg, nor he should, if you think about it. And if you want to look at pure incompetence, you study Bristow Station, study George Sykes. But I digress about Bristow Station. Yeah.
We should jump off here soon, too, because we got stuff to do today.
Oh, it's going to be a big day of grocery shopping, Mary. It's going to be very exciting.
Well, we want to get out to the battlefield, too, because it's supposed to be nice out. So,
but it's good. It's good to feel the warm weather. I mean, I think this is probably more of a flash in the pan wagon. It's going to get cold again this week, but it's great to feel the sun, 70, 80 degrees here in town. Yeah. All my friends back in Boston, it's 30.
Yep. Cold back in Canada, too. They're supposed to get snow there this week in southwestern Ontario.
It definitely is. But I think it's, for people who to come onto this, definitely Definitely get out to these battlefields, especially the folks who live in this area. Get out and see the stuff because
Yep.
it's just my God, being able to walk the ground. Went to Pry House yesterday with
Yep.
George McClellan. You can stand on the same rock that little Mac stood as he stood out, and you can watch the battle take place. You can picture him with his glasses, and and the vista is exactly the same. You can see the battlefield, and you can go right up to the house and go and do the stuff and go see these things and go to
Yep.
Southmount and go to Harper's Ferry, go to these places because otherwise, if you're really into the stuff, it's such a great thing to see, and you're missing out if you don't. There's no question,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, Bryant said Meade did fight a brilliant campaign post Gettysburg, establishing beyond the Rapidan River as the starting point for the Orland.
Yeah, and that's why people unfortunately think that when Meade came over, Grant came
Grant,
over to take over in the fall of '64. That in the fall of '63, that he took over the AOP,
yeah,
right? And he didn't. But that's why a lot of people think we mentioned this in the the Bennettville episode. Um, is the plan was for Sherman to merge. And at some point, Grant told him, no, you're good. Stay where you are. And a lot of people think because he wanted the AOP to get a lot of credit for catching Lee
yeah,
and bagging the army. So I think George Meade, he gets obviously he gets a lot of credit. He's an
yep,
A-lister in the American Civil War. But I think he died young. He wasn't a very personable fella. But I
no,
think he was somebody who was a hard fighter. And he'll look. I personally cringe when people say that he let Lee escape at Gettysburg
yeah. I'm like, oh,
because
no,
it's short sighted because it's the people who that's the top shelf things
yep,
because they did chase him down. If you read Masterson Brown's great book on Retreat from Gettysburg, it explains it all. He chased him right through Virginia. He did not give up.
yep,
And so it's a very, very big misconception. Did he let him escape over at Williamsport? He got burned by one day. But sometimes the team wins too. Lee beat him that day. But again,
yep.
he wasn't for lack of effort. No question.
Yeah. Well, remember I found that letter last week that was a response to a letter Howard wrote to Lincoln, and Lincoln was the response that Lincoln gave Howard, and you could tell that Howard went at him for his treatment of Meade. And Lincoln admitted in the letter, he's like, I admit that I've been very harsh, so has the press. You know what, you're right, I'm not there. And I think Howard wrote him, I got to find the original letter, but I think Howard wrote him and said, you need to slow your roll with the media and with how you're bashing the army and specifically the commander. This
Mhm.
is the situation we're in. We have wounded commanders. Some of them are dead. Probably mentioned the horses as well. Like, we are not in shape to pursue as aggressively as you think we should. And you basically told him, you're also not here.
Mhm.
You don't know the situation. And I think that letter kind of brought Howard to Lincoln's attention, seeing that Howard was not afraid to stand up for Meade and say, like, I think you need to slow your roll with this.
Mhm.
Because it's not long after that Howard does meet Lincoln, and he gets the Freedmen's Bureau. And I think that Lincoln respected him for, standing up for the army and saying, we are not in a good situation right now.
Mhm.
And you're not here to see it. And Lincoln said, you know what, you're right. Like, imagine Howard's 32 years old at the Battle of Gettysburg, and
Mhm.
you write the President of the United States, Lincoln, and you basically tell him, stop what you're doing right now. You don't
Yeah.
understand what's happening.
I mean, that's the thing that blows my mind is the age of these guys. 32 years old. I mean, imagine
Yep.
being 32 being in that spot. We were talking when we did Bentonville. Some of these commanders at First North Carolina Junior Reserves, they were all 17-year-old kids being
Yep.
commanded by a 21-year-olds. And
Yeah.
these are front line. They were home guard who got pulled into the battle because they were running low on men. Imagine 17-year-old kids fighting at the Morris farm.
Yep.
And
Howard was
it's
30.
crazy. It's crazy. It's just if you think about it, Patty O'Rourke, right?
Yeah.
Class of '61 in West Point, graduated first in his class. Was last in that class?
Yep.
Custer, right?
Wow.
These dudes are young,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's easy to forget that because they're grainy black and white photos, and that's what
Yeah.
we know of them. But
Yeah.
when you study them, think about what's going through your head when you're 21 years old, right?
Yeah.
It ain't guarding your flank. It's
No, and
finding
that's
your
what
beer. That's what it is, right?
and you think about it, like, like Howard he turned 34 the day the march, the day before the March to the Sea began. I
Yeah.
think he was the youngest commander on that march.
Oh, I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was. Again, most of these guys weren't that old anyway.
No,
I mean,
Sherman was 10 years older than him,
I
and
mean, think about it. The oldest commander at Gettysburg was George Sears Green, right? And he
yeah,
was 62 years old. That's not that old. He was the oldest.
yeah,
I mean, it's just one of those things when you really think about it,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. But it was like, I'm gonna dig around and see if I can find the original letter that Howard wrote, because I think he's
Yeah, that'd be good to find that, but that would be a good find. But unfortunately, things that are supposed to be made hidden and probably stay hidden for a reason. It just
but,
never can be found.
but I have the response.
Yeah, you have the response.
Yeah,
But again, who the hell knows? That'd be a great find because, like we said before, you can do your master, your PhD thesis. You could write a book on a
yeah,
subject. You're always one find away from sinking your battleship
yeah,
and making all of your history moot.
yeah. Well,
And
the other
that's the
letter,
good that's the yin and the yang of history.
oh,
It's
that's what's fun
several,
about
you
the
know.
other letter I want to find is the letter that was written to Howard after Chancellorsville telling him to step down from command of the 11th, request another command.
Yeah.
It's because the Germans will always run. That's what's told to him. All he said was it was a high-ranking officer in the army. I suspect it was probably Meade.
It probably was. It probably was. So, all right. So what's coming up for us next, Mary? As we jump
So
off
we are
here,
going to be recording Fort Pillow, not this week, but the week after. And then what's the other one we're doing?
we're doing Sultana.
Sultana.
Yeah, the Sultana disaster, which is
Yeah.
a brutal story. Talking about the end of the war and men going home, overloading a boat, exploding, and oh god, it's brutal. But I think they're important stories to tell because they're all human stories, and,
Yep.
and it's good to do. Fort Pillow is an interesting one because it's a classic he said she said. I mean,
Yep.
you have a situation where there's one side that says that it was a massacre,
Yep.
right? The other side says no, they were running and they were combatants, so we were shooting them as they were running. Um, and so it's an interesting thing. But the one thing about Fort Pillow, and this makes it very unique to a battle, it's one of the only battles where the killed majorly outnumber the wounded.
Wow.
So there's a lot of truth to what they're saying, but it's a
Yeah.
question of he said, she said. And
Yeah.
Sherman backs Forrest.
Oof.
So it's interesting to see how it goes. So, but again, that's why you talk about it. But the problem is, though, you try to tell like it is and let people
Yep.
make up their own decisions. We're not skew one way or the other. But I mean, but it's no one likes to talk about it because it's a third rail of history.
Yep,
But you got
it
to
is.
talk about it. You got to do
Yep.
it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So hopefully people will enjoy that.
We'll see. We'll
You
see.
don't.
You're gonna get the mail. You get the emails on that one. I'm not checking the email that week. But
No.
we'll be too north and too south like we always are.
Yep, exactly. We're too north,
Anyways,
too south. Like, I don't understand. We were called Too North after we released an episode about who was it? The
it
dude
was
here.
Gordon.
No, it wasn't Gordon. It was the real angry fellow. The dog died at his grave. The dog's buried where he was.
Barksdale.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Released an episode about Barksdale, Confederate general. Someone reviews us and says we're too north.
You're too northern. You got but damn Yankees. All you ever talk about is the North. Your episode of Barksdale. What the hell? Okay, fine, whatever.
All right.
That's fine. That's fine. You can't satisfy everybody.
No.
But our job isn't really to do that anyway. Our job is just to have fun telling the stories. If people
Yep.
like it, they do. If they don't, they don't. That's cool too. Whatever.
Yep,
It doesn't make a
exactly.
difference. All right. So off we go. So hopefully it's a great week. It's a beautiful day here in the 717. We are going to go out and hopefully hit the battlefield, enjoy the day. Hopefully it's warm out where you are. AQ, well, can I tell you, it sucks to be you with the cold, but at least you can stay inside and find something new, I'm sure.
Yep.
Hopefully the weather finds you nicely wherever you are. Any final words from you, Fincheru?
Thanks for everybody for coming out today. Great time as always. We love the comments. We love the questions. So you guys are an
Yep.
awesome group.
And again, we appreciate those who came out to Getty's Gear. And
Yes.
and if you are in town, it's the place to go for
Yeah.
all your stuff. Tell them we said hello. You can give you a free Breakfast Club sticker if you
Yeah,
want.
there's stickers there too.
Yeah, but no, they're good people, and we appreciate them having us on. It was very humbling to do that. We've done other places too, but this one was fun because it was great to bring people in to a place we really support. So, everybody, have a great rest of the day. We'll talk soon. Big
Yep.
hockey night in my world, Mary Boston College. against
Yep.
Denver.
Mm.
It's gonna be a tough one. I might be to warm up for that one. Anyway, off we go. Everybody have a great